Hi, my name is Fatima. I am co-founder of Collective 365, and we just want to say thank you for joining us today for Lunch and Learn. Our topic is tips for grant writing, and we are thrilled to have Sarah Young and Bianca Myrick joining us. And before we get started, I just want to do a brief introduction about kind of what made you be the selected speakers for this event, because I want folks to know that you bring a diverse perspective, because you've kind of been on both sides, both of you. And so I'm really, really excited to have folks hear and learn from you. So without further ado, I will share your bios. Bianca Myrick is a native of Petersburg, Virginia, and the founder and executive director of Pretty Purpose, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering adolescent girls to grow and glow. As a middle grades educator, Bianca has a passion for working with adolescents and saw a need in her community where girls could have a safe space. She continues to work with her team to build occupation. Hold on, okay. She continues to work with her team to build organizational capacity and increase opportunities for women and girls. In addition to her role as executive director of Pretty Purpose, Bianca is a consultant for Mentor Virginia, where she works to help build youth organizations around the state of Virginia. She is a 2010 graduate of the Department of Teaching and Learning at Virginia State University, where she serves as an adjunct instructor, empowering freshman students with tools to be successful in life. Bianca also has a master's degree in public administration from Virginia Commonwealth University and hopes to receive her certificate in nonprofit management soon. Her goal is to continue advocating for women, girls, and families through her work as a nonprofit leader and consulting career. While she has many roles, her most fulfilling role is one of being a mom to her amazing 9-year-old son, Bryce, who kills it on the basketball court. That's not part of the bio. I'm just throwing that in there. Sarah Young, welcome. She joins us from Peter Paul. She joined Peter Paul in October 2018 and currently serves as the Director of Development. Sarah's experience includes running annual giving campaigns, managing a prospect pipeline, developing communications and marketing plans, stewarding donor relationships, and evaluating and monitoring development strategies. Prior to joining Peter Paul, Sarah was the Associate Director of Development at Esperanza Academy. Am I saying that right?
Esperanza, close enough.
Okay, give me 1 second. A tuition-free independent middle school for girls in Lawrence, Massachusetts. In her role, Sarah, God bless you. In her role, Sarah increased grant revenue 100%. And I know you want to talk to Bianca, but give me 1 second. Increased grant revenue 100% and broadened the base of support to the greater Boston region. Prior to that, Sarah worked as a philanthropic consultant at the Boston Foundation, working directly with donors to increase the impact of their philanthropy, while also working to promote effective philanthropy throughout thought leadership, cutting edge research and philanthropic education programs. Use your inside voice. Sarah holds a bachelor's degree in Spanish from Dickinson College. She is a graduate of Emerging Nonprofit Leaders, which is a year-long professional development program for those in nonprofit sector. She's a member of Project Home's Young Professionals Board and a 2021 recipient of the VAFRE Rising Star Award, an award given to rising fundraising professionals who exhibit excellent potential and who has demonstrated remarkable talent at an early stage in their fundraising career. So like I said earlier, they are coming to you with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I'm really, really excited to have them both. And thank you for bearing with me. I have a 2.5-year-old who will be making appearances, as you've heard, and she's really eager to talk to Bianca. So first question, jumping right in. Can you share your experience as a grant writer? What have your challenges and successes been?
Sure, I'm happy to kick us off, and Bianca, we can switch off however you want. So I don't want to step on your toes, but figure I'll just jump in right here to talk a little bit about my experience as a grant writer. So I've done grant writing for a number of years now. And as Fatima mentioned, my career started on the other side, on the grant making side. So doing a lot of proposal review and proposal evaluation, which then translated really nicely when it was my responsibility to write those proposals. So I've done a number of different held a number of different development positions where grant writing was a major component of my work. And this was mentioned that in my previous role, I doubled the grant income that organization received. And that was really just due to having somebody dedicated to grant writing. It's something that not all organizations have capacity to or resources to dedicate to. But my position there allowed me that flexibility to really focus on that, spend time doing it, do some research, start building relationships with program officers at foundations and donors who were connected in those spaces. And just increase the organization's visibility in that way. So that's kind of been my experience, kind of starting off on the grant writing side. And then when I moved from Boston down to Richmond and continued that work of grant seeking, it was a new challenge in that the Richmond community is such a closely connected community, one where everybody seems to already know each other. And I was this outsider who didn't have those relationships yet. But those skills that I'd cultivated prior of just working on organizational visibility, going out to events, which I know none of us are doing right now, but starting to build those relationships, just get folks familiar with your organization. That's really been key to the success of building those institutional funding pipelines.
So I'm coming from a background that's probably the complete opposite of Sarah. I am truly from a background where I didn't have any experience grant writing, and finding the nonprofit Pretty Purpose. I would say that the biggest challenge when I first started was just, not having the knowledge that I needed to have to pursue grants. So I think I could really speak to those who may have startup organizations or, are trying to start up an organization, that sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So I really had to work at educating myself and building relationships with those who are providing funding to kind of get in the door, because sometimes that's the hardest part, is just getting in the door. So I would say that was a big challenge for us, is just, fundamentally you may start something, you have all of this great passion for it, but you have to do the foundational steps necessary to make sure that you're ready for funding. So, writing a grant proposal, I would say, isn't hard. I mean, you're answering questions, but, what does reporting look like? What does writing goals and objectives look like? What about, what is the impact that you're going to make? Do you have the capacity for the grant? Those were some things that, I didn't think about when initially starting. And so it took a little bit of time for me to educate myself, on all of those components to position our organization in a space to become more attractive to funders.
Bianca, you made a great point that got me thinking of trying to figure out, now I'm losing my train of thought as I'm thinking about it. Let me pause there. It'll come back to me.
Sarah, I'm want to guess that maybe you were thinking about Bianca's point about getting in the door and building those relationships. Was it something along those lines?
Yeah, and I was thinking of, the reason I lost it is because I was thinking of a specific example, and that example is now gone, which isn't helpful. But yeah, getting in that door can be such a challenge, because so many institutional funders kind of have a pretty stagnant pool of grantees, and they're used to funding who they like and who they know, and it can be hard as a new organization to break into that. And it can be kind of a tempting direction to go into create this big pie in the sky story of all the amazing things your organization does, the wonderful impact you're going to have, and all these great evaluation metrics that you can track. But then when it comes time to report on that, if you can't say that you did those things, it won't put you in a good position to stay with that foundation. So it can be challenging to get in that front door, and a way to do that can be tempting to kind of inflate the story. Not to say that your organization is not doing wonderful work, but you want to be able to back it up and show the impact that you're having. So I always caution folks to not go down the path of kind of inflating and creating a pie in the sky narrative of what impact will be, especially if you're new and figuring out a lot of what those impact measures are going to be. And it's okay that those things get figured out over time. But I always just caution against painting too bright of a picture for funders that you can't necessarily execute upon in your first year or two.
Thank you for that reminder of like being realistic. So my next question, when you talk about like being realistic and Bianca, I love when you said like kind of knowing if you have the capacity to like take on the funding. That's like a great segue to the next question. What are some things folks should do prior to applying for a grant? And that can be things that they should do or things that they should maybe even be asking themselves.
Yeah, so I'll start on this and just maybe outline some of the things that we do at Pretty Purpose. Let me paint the picture of how small our organization is. Similar to what Sarah said, we don't have the capacity to have someone dedicated to grant writing. So it really is a team effort for us. One thing that we do is we do have some volunteers. We have a development committee and we do have a board. We kind of come together and they kind of will send me opportunities that they think are good fits. And what I will do is I will research and I will kind of outline and even just put into a document and date it with all of the opportunities that I think would be a good fit. You know, maybe the entity may have a mission that is similar to our mission, or the program that we're running, you know, would be a good funding fit for them. I map that out for pretty much, I try to do it for the entire year so that I at least have a calendar. And I will also look at organizations that that particular funder has funded in the past. I will attend their informational sessions. Sometimes for specific grants, they will have like an informational session. Try to build a relationship with the program officer. Our program typically falls under like education or after school programming, things like that. So just speak with that program officer to, you know, even see like, yeah, I read and I think we're a good fit, but let me talk to this person and they can tell me, you know, whether we're a good fit. You know, those are some foundational things that I will do. And then usually if I'm working on a grant proposal, depending on what type of grant proposal it is, because it's like levels to grant proposals. We're a really tiny organization. So some of the grants that we apply for, it doesn't require any reporting. It's just like, hey, we're giving you this money, you know, you can kind of keep it moving. But when we're talking about grants with like foundations, or organizations that are seeking to improve like health outcomes, sometimes I will put together like a grants team, which will consist of myself, and it may be another staff member, and we have a volunteer who works on grants for another organization. They do a lot of proofreading for me. and we'll kind of work together to actually write the grant. But I would definitely say doing research, building relationships, connecting with the program officer, and just, I think Sarah made a great point, just making sure like, okay, if we go for this, is this something that we can handle? Because I think the reality is that when you're just starting up, you know, grants can look very attractive, but that shouldn't be your largest funding source. Really, your largest funding source should be coming from, you know, like individuals. And you just want to make sure that, hey, when we get this grant, it means that we have to do work. Do we have the capacity to do the work? Does, you know, right now, Pretty Purpose, if someone were to say, hey, we're going to give you a $5 million grant, well, what would I do with that? Do I have time to execute that? No. So just making sure that you're clear and that you can execute it as well.
Yeah, Bianca, you said everything I would say to that. I think what you said about human connections is so important. And I always encourage folks to reach out to the program officers. Most program officers should be willing and happy to have a conversation with you, even if it ends up not being the right fit. Foundations exist to strengthen society, strengthen the nonprofit sector. So they are working for you in a way as well. They want to help us all live in a better world. So if you want to reach out and talk to somebody, just reach out and ask. And they should be, in most cases, willing and happy to have those conversations. And those relationships are going to be key to future success. And even if that foundation's not the right fit, they might have a colleague at another foundation. And if they have a great conversation with you, they might pass you off to their friends. So trying to just build those relationships as much as possible is really important. And then Bianca, you also said this, but just including some program staff where you can, especially for organizations with less capacity to focus on the grant writing piece. If you can have your program director come to a grant meeting with you, help you put together the application, they're the ones who know everything. They know the ins and outs of the programs, where sometimes, speaking from my perspective in the administrative side, we get a little distance from it, and we want to be able to tell a compelling story, but who can do it better than the folks who are on the front lines doing it every day? So if your staff have resources and time to help you and partner with you, it can be great to kind of bring those folks in as you explore different opportunities.
And I think those are really great points for people who are just starting out, or maybe have only been around for a year to 3 years. Something else that Bianca said that I want to like underscore, or maybe like stretch out a little bit, was like the mapping out. And sometimes it might be like your first year, if your focus is just individual grants, take that first year or the first 2 years and do the research of like the grants available to you, and like map out like when you're going to apply for them. So that way, if you are a small staff, like Bianca with Pretty Purpose is kind of like everything. And then you can say, all right, here are 2 grants that are similar. I'm going to be able to like share kind of the application process for that. Or I know like April is heavy grants, right? And so maybe in March, we slow down on our program or shift some things. So planning things out can be really, really helpful. So I just wanted to like stretch out those 2 points that both of you made, in case that maybe wasn't as clear to folks.
Thank you for
So
sharing that, Fatima.
yeah.
So I think a lot of people who may be either in the development field or executive directors know there's like a season to grants where it seems like all you're doing is writing grants. So that is very important. I can say that personally, the board and program staff know when my grant writing season is, so they understand that I may not be as hands-on with some other things because, you know, I'm kind of taking the lead on these grants. And for us, it just seems like the January to June season is really heavy with grants.
Thank you for adding that. Sarah, did you have anything else to add about grant season?
Yeah, so for us, it's a little different. We typically have two bigger chunks. We have usually an October, November chunk where it seems like everything's due, and then everything else is due in April. So those are kind of the busiest times of year for us on the grant writing side. So like Bianca said, just plan out your schedules, try to do as much as you can plan out your year. If you're trying to do an event, and you're super busy in October, don't plan that event for October. Do it another time when you can actually focus on it. Because as we all know, schedules get crazy, and the better you can kind of plan your whole year, inclusive of those grant calendars, the more set up for success your team will be.
Sorry. So when you think about planning, right? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I don't have a program staff, an executive director. I don't have a development officer. What advice would you give somebody who's like, it's just me? So like Collective 365, we offer grants to individuals and groups. But then there are some nonprofits that it's literally one person, even though they're an organization. So what would your tips be about like maximizing their time when applying for grants, or how to even tackle that? And it doesn't have to be grants, it could just be like fundraising too.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. So when we started, it kind of was just me. And right now, I'm in a part-time executive director role, and we have two part-time program coordinators. But, prior to that, we were slowly building, like every year we were able to build. So what I would, first say is you have to maximize your time by blocking off your time. For those individuals who it really may just be them, they probably are just starting out in building. You really need to look at your calendar, and you really need to say, I'm going to dedicate this day or these 2 days per week. And you really need to start by just researching those grants. That's what I would do. I would research the grant, and then I would say, these are the grants I'm going to apply for. And I mean, some organizations are applying for lots and lots of grants. We are not that organization yet. We may map out like 12 grants or 15 grants that we're going to apply for, writing those due dates down. And then every Sunday I do this. I sit with my calendar and I say, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., I'm going to work on this. Additionally, it is very important, I think, to engage people. There are lots of people out there who want to give back, and giving back for them means lending their expertise. So you need to, you can't be a one-man show. Eventually you need to engage others. You need a team. I would also say be kind to yourself, and that Rome wasn't built in a day. So you need to really set attainable and achievable goals. If you're still working your full-time job, is it realistic that you're going to apply for 20 grants in 1 month? Probably not. So you have to be kind to yourself and, just set achievable and attainable goals. I would also advise people to invest in yourself, invest in your education by going to some of the workshops that a lot of foundations offer. I mean, I think Sarah said it when she said these foundations exist to strengthen the community and strengthen organizations. I mean, they have lunch and learns, they have cohorts, they have all sorts of learning workshops that are very affordable, sometimes free. And you take your time and you go to those so that, you know, you will be ready when the time comes. Additionally, I would just say you need to really plan and map out your time, and like, don't overwhelm yourself, and just, you know, be realistic. But I'm telling you, sit down on a Sunday and map out your week. And for some weeks, you may have 5 hours to dedicate. And then another week, you might have 10 hours. And then another week, you know, maybe you're off work and you're like, well, shoot, you know, I'm gonna put in 15 hours. You just really have to, you know, be mindful about your time management. I would say that's the biggest thing for me, and being realistic, because in the beginning I was not realistic, but you know, now I'm more realistic about what I can do. Who can I engage? What can the team do? Additionally, it's okay to sit back and build a team. You know, now I feel like things flow a little better for me because, you know, we have people who can help, you know, people who have these gifts, you know, that they can give in these different perspectives. And that came from really taking some time to build like an army of engaged people, where you can have these committees, or you can have someone that says, hey, I'm a grant writer for this organization and I really want to help. Literally, I had someone come to me and say this. They write grants for way bigger organization than us. And they said, can I just proofread? I'll proofread your grants, send them to me. I'll give, literally, that's all this person does. And it's such a big help to me. I can just shoot it over to him and he will give his feedback. And then I can, you know, rest knowing that I had another set of eyes, you know, that has a little more skin in the game than me, just a different perspective. So it's okay to sit back and engage people and build a team as well.
I dropped a resource in the chat too. The Community Foundation here in Richmond has a great learning series, and they offer a ton of different courses. And there's one upcoming, I think a 3-part series in May on grant writing. So that's a resource I might encourage. I haven't done that specific one, but I've done other classes there, and they've all been really worthwhile and useful. And then I'll just add a couple of quick things. Other things that I think about when approaching a potential opportunity is taking a look at the reporting requirements, if that's something that is available. And if you see, oh, they are asking a huge amount of reporting and I don't think I have the capacity to execute that. That's something that happened with me earlier this year. We were approached by a foundation to apply for this big giant grant opportunity. And I looked at the reporting requirements. I looked at what else we're trying to do this year at Peter Paul. I looked at all the COVID challenges that we've been presented, and it was like, I don't think I can spend my time on this opportunity. It's not going to serve us overall, even though the grant would be nice, but I can't be good stewards of that funds. So just taking a look at those reporting requirements and kind of lining them up with what your organization has going on, and maybe it's just not the right fit. And the last thing I'll add to that is also, if you're denied a grant, when I'm denied a grant, I take it out of the pipeline. I don't keep trying year after year. Maybe in a one-off case, I will kind of revisit and have a conversation. Okay, we haven't aligned before. Is now the right time for us to apply? But once they say no, I just kind of remove it and move on and focus my efforts in other places. It can be kind of an easy trap to fall in of, let me keep trying and let me rewrite it again and see if now I can make it fit. But if you're not aligning and they're saying no, put it to the side and pursue some other strategies. So that's just what I'd add in terms of kind of making it work for your time and your capacity.
Sarah, I actually have a question about that. I think you brought up a really good point about, once again, going back to that capacity. We received a grant this year, and I know it's going to take up a lot of my time. So I'm actually putting a halt to some other grants because this is a great fit for us. But it's a lot of reporting. So I'm like, Bianca, you can focus on some smaller grants, like your corporate grants that may not require a lot of reporting. So thank you for sharing that. But you mentioned that if you get denied a grant opportunity, you take it out of the pool. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I've done that before where I've taken it out of the pool, but I've also tried again with certain organizations. So just from your experience as a development director, I would love to hear, you just expand a little bit more on that, what you're thinking when you say, hey, let's just keep it moving, because I'm listening to you like, maybe I should just keep it moving on a couple of these.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it is a balance too. Sometimes you want to keep your name at the forefront of that funder's mind. And even if you are getting denied, it's good for your overall relationship. And that can be kind of hard to judge, what should I do that's actually good for us versus what should I just move off of my plate here. So I think key to that is kind of maintaining those relationships that we've talked about with the program officers or the staff of the institution, and just letting them know, could you, this actually happened last week. So Peter Paul has been a recipient of a grant for a couple of years, and we were denied this year kind of immediately after submitting the application. And I called the program officer and said, hey, what happened? And I was thinking, did you even read our application or did you just deny it right away? And she, let me know that that foundation has decided to hone in on one specific component of, they typically focus on 3 areas. And in light of COVID, they're going really deep on one. And I said, okay, can you let us know if the priorities change of the foundation in the future? And I have it on my list, so I'll kind of keep an eye on that. But that's one that I'm not even going to look at until either I hear something from them or something publicly changes about that foundation. So it's a balance of when to just take it off. If you've tried for a couple of years and you're getting no response and it's a place you don't really have relationships with, that's someone I would suggest just taking off your list. And there's a couple of corporations that have been that for Peter Paul. Maybe we got 1 year funding and then tried the next 2 and didn't even hear back anything. So I just take those folks off. If it's some place where you have a relationship and there is a connection point, keep that relationship going, but save yourself the effort and try to just get an answer from the program officer before you get to work on it. And again, they should be, in most cases, they're going to be wanting to help you, and they don't want you spending tons of time on things. If they know you're not going to get a grant, they're likely, hopefully, going to tell you, don't apply this year. So keep those relationships going where you can. If you don't have them, maybe that's a sign that it's not the best fit.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, Bianca, for asking that follow-up question, because I too was kind of like, wait, because I know with Collective 365 as a grant funder, we do encourage people to apply again, because for us, often and I say often, this first grant cycle, we had a lot of people that were strong contenders, but we just don't have unlimited funding to support them, right? So I think both of you in different ways have hit on the whole communication and building relationships. We even had some people this grant cycle reach out to us at Collective 365 and say, hey, why wasn't I selected? So Sarah, I think it's really good to just have that conversation, to make sure that it's not a matter of oh, I was close, I just need to apply again next year in case the pool changes, versus I was way off. Like Bianca said, you read something and you think it's a fit, and then you talk to them and you're like, oh, wait, maybe I misunderstood what those words on the paper meant, and that's not uncommon. So for folks listening, I just want to reiterate, even if you don't want to make a phone call, consider sending an email with questions to learn a little bit more, because as somebody who has read like calls for grant proposals, the way they're written sometimes is vague. And so it's easy, because you're passionate, to fall into the hole of like, oh, this is for me, this is speaking to me. And so that extra like line of communication can help. So thank you both for that. My next question is, where do you go to get grants? Like, where should people be looking to find grant funding? And then the other part of the question is, how can people go about getting those individual donations? So you can answer both or either or.
Yeah, I can kick us off here with a couple of thoughts on that. So in terms of where to look, and I'm putting a lens of kind of being a newer, smaller staff organization, you don't probably want to spend a lot of time on those big directories. So I'm thinking of places like Council on Foundations, I think Foundation Center, like all those massive databases. That takes a lot of time to go through, and those might be worthwhile places to just take a look at and explore a little bit. But what you're probably going to have more success in is looking at some of your peer organizations. Take a look at their annual report, see who funds them, see what corporations and foundations are listed on their donor pages in their annual report, and then go check out their website, see if they have open grant application processes, see if you know anybody there, start a conversation with them. That's where I suggest folks spend more of their time, as opposed to those big databases. And I get those daily emails from Virginia Grant Watch and all these millions of opportunities. And I don't look at them because I know it's going to be big and probably places that have a lot of grant requirements and evaluations and all of that. So I focus local on who we know, who's already shown interest in work like ours. So for example, if I'm trying to find new opportunities for Peter Paul, let me go look at some other youth service agencies or after school providers and look at their annual report and see who funds them. So I would suggest that approach. I think you'll get more bang from your buck than doing big searches or general Google searches. Start with your peers and start with who you know.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. Every grant opportunity that we've gotten has been through individuals that we know sharing that opportunity, or something that I've seen on social media because someone has shared the opportunity, or the foundation or organization has shared the opportunity. And I love what Sarah said about looking at who, the same way that you might look at the organization to see who they fund, looking at organizations like yourself and see who funds them. You asked about individuals. So that's all about, I would say, building relationships. I would say when Pretty Purpose first really started to, I would say when we first, officially became a nonprofit, it was just who we knew, and then them engaging who they knew, and then them engaging who they knew. And then, of course, we got into a space where we said, hey, I think that we need a donor management system. We need something to track this, to see the trends, to track campaigns, to store these individuals' information so that we can continue to reach out to them and build that relationship, thanking them, because there's so many nonprofits, they don't have to donate to you. And thanking them could be a phone call. It could be a thank you note. It could be a social media shout out. I mean, there's several different ways that you can thank your donors. also keeping them updated on what your programs are doing. That could be communicated through a newsletter, anything of that nature. Also, I would say making sure that you just check in with certain donors or check in with donors, not to ask them for money, just keeping them updated. And I would also say, hey, circle, if there's a donor who hasn't donated in a while, circle back to them. But a donor management system can help with all that. And, you know, we didn't use one of those until we were had gotten to a point where we had quite a few donors. We use Little Green Light, but there's so many out there. And we try not to, you know, we try to look for opportunities where our management systems are affordable for us. So we go through TechSoup. You may want to look at TechSoup. They provide technology and, you know, different management systems to nonprofits at, you know, reduced prices. But those are just some of the things that, you know, I can think of when it comes to donor stewardship. And once again, there's opportunities where you can learn about what that process looks like. Definitely encouraging those who are already engaged with your organization to engage others. And I would say that's the biggest thing that helped with our growth of donors is talk about the organization, invite a donor to come to a meeting or come see your program if it's appropriate, because some services are not appropriate for that. But, you know, if it's appropriate, you know, invite them to see the great things, you know, that you're doing. And sometimes this goes hand in hand with marketing, making sure that, you know, you're able to tell and elevate the stories of the people that you're working with. So those are just some things that I can think of.
Yeah, and I know we're talking today about grant writing and that institutional funding, but individuals really are the bread and butter of most organizations. And that's, if you have a healthy individual giving, you're setting yourselves up for success. That's so much easier to bank on renewed support from individuals than it is foundations who are constantly having shifting priorities, going in different directions. You have not much control over that. Where you can control is your individuals. And as Bianca said, stewardship is everything. Make sure you're thanking people. Someone who's had a positive experience giving at your organization is going to tell their friends about it and going to tell their networks about it. So creating those champions for your organization, it just helps spread the word. A couple other thoughts on individuals. So Peter Paul's had a really strong year with individuals. We've seen some declines in our corporate and foundation supporters, largely in part due to COVID and the financial challenges that has presented for them. But we have seen incredible strength with our individuals. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is that we've put a lot more effort into our social media this year, sharing stories. You know, typically we'll invite folks for these bus tours that we do or tours of our building. There's tons of volunteer opportunities at Peter Paul in a traditional year, and none of that's happening right now. So in an effort to keep folks engaged, we've just stepped up our social media presence and had fun videos and fun messages, little virtual tours of different program aspects. So trying to step up in that way to keep folks feeling engaged and connected. And then just telling a compelling impact story through your marketing materials, through your appeal letters. through, and like Bianca said, it's important too to not always be asking. Sometimes you just should say thank you with no asks attached. So whether it's a holiday card or a year-end card or whatever your organization chooses to do, those non-ask touches make a big difference. And just being able to tell a compelling story, placing yourself and your work within a bigger system. So what we talk a lot about at Peter Paul is, facing both a pandemic and an epidemic right now. The pandemic, of course, being COVID, epidemic being the structural racism and inequities that we're seeing in our city, in our region, in our country, and kind of placing ourselves within both of those bigger structures. How are we addressing racial inequity and injustice? How are we addressing the pandemic? If you can kind of put yourselves in the front line of whatever the biggest issues are, that is what's going to make your impact story so compelling. And that's where individuals are going to grab onto and then tell their friends about it. So I think our success with individuals this year is largely because we've done a decent job of placing ourselves in those bigger issues and telling a compelling story. But thank yous are the way to go. That's the best way to keep folks happy with you. Thank them all the time.
Yeah, who doesn't like to hear the words thank you? So my next question is, as a grant maker, both of you have experience reviewing grants to give people money. What is it that you're looking for? Like you've kind of talked about like telling a compelling story. Bianca hit on, making sure you're able to identify your goals, objectives, and know if you have capacity to report. But like, what else should people know about grant writing?
A couple thoughts on that. So in addition to all those things that were just said about impact, storytelling, metrics, evaluation, all of those really, really important things. The most important thing that a foundation or an institutional funder is looking for is mission alignment. So do you fall within their priority areas? Are you, as the work that you're doing, helping them achieve what their goals are through their philanthropy? That's really the biggest thing. And again, you want to make sure that there is alignment before you pursue that opportunity. But if it's a good fit, that's you're off to a great start. And being able to tell that story of how you align, look at the proposal. What I always do when I get a grant proposal is I print it out and I highlight buzzwords. And then I make sure I use those words in the application itself, because a lot of effort went into writing that proposal. They want to see certain things. And if you use the words that they use, it's going to just trigger back to that process for them and be good for you. So I always do that, try to use the language that they use. Those are important things. And then in addition to that is financial stability is really important, and foundations are going to be looking at your financial documents, and not all organizations will have the same financial documents as others. So you might not have an audit, you might not have all the requirements that they might be looking for. But if you can demonstrate financial health, and the kind of easiest ways to demonstrate that, are you budgeting for a deficit? If you are, that's probably going to raise a red flag, and people are going to ask why you're doing that. Do you have funding diversity? So if you're like solely funded by one person or one government grant, that's going to raise a flag for funders. They want to see some funding diversity. Is revenue trending down? So are you raising less funds each year? That's going to raise a red flag. So those are just things to think about. And again, all funders are different, but those are some of the metrics that I would be looking at if I were evaluating a proposal and kind of looking at the financial health. And then last note from me is spelling and grammar errors. It's going to flag to funders, and some of these tips I'm saying are things that I've seen as opposed to things that I necessarily believe. So while I might want to be forgiving of a spelling or grammar error because it's not a big deal and I do it myself all the time, if you're in a tight competition with a couple of nonprofits and yours is full of errors, it's not going to necessarily make you jump above the others. So I always say be super diligent with your spelling and grammar.
Sarah pretty much summed it up. I would say additionally, and this goes back to financial health, sustainability. what is the plan for sustainability? Because this may be a 1-year opportunity, or, funders don't have to fund you year to year. So what will you do, if you're not funded again? What is the plan for that? I think that kind of just ties in with the financial health. I'm trying to think about anything else that I can think of that I'm specifically looking for. How are you leveraging resources? And that kind of ties in with sustainability as well. I know I've reviewed over a couple of applications, and one really stood out to me because it was like they were like partnering, and it was almost like to reduce the duplication of services and bring all of the strong aspects of their respective programs together. And that really stood out to me when they were speaking. They were like, oh, this one organization plants seedlings, and this one organization already like does gardens. And then this other person was like, they do refrigerators or something, like community refrigerators. And I'm just like, wow, this all like flows together well. And I just think on the other side, when I've applied for funding, and that collaboration piece was asked, I think that that's an important piece, and I see why, because it just makes sense. It just makes sense. Well, we can give you all this funding because you're going to come together to leverage those resources, which, makes financial sense.
And it speaks to sustainability, right? Because it's like, oh, well, if I don't have it, I can lend, work with you. So yeah, those are all great points. I do want to make sure that folks listening understand that Sarah and Bianca are describing traditional funding sources. These do not apply to Collective 365. So while we would like you to have perfect grammar and spelling, that we don't even have that as a part of our metrics. We also do not require that folks collaborate. We don't have a question about like your financials as far as like audits and what your budget looks like, because we recognize that many of the folks that are seeking funding are left out of those traditional funding sources because of those reasons. So I do want to make that clear that we're talking about traditional grant funding sources and not specifically Collective 365. And if you do have questions about Collective 365 funding, please shoot us an email. Sarah, did you want to say something else?
I was just going to say, that's so important. And that's why I'm so happy and excited to be here today, is I just love everything that Collective 365 is doing. And I see a lot of organizations starting to move more in that direction. So while yes, I have been talking mostly about traditional funders, there is a lot of more movement towards that side of things, of making applications more accessible, lowering the burden on the applicants, prioritizing anecdotal and qualitative stories over quantitative data. So I think the work that you're doing is really setting a stage for where I would love to see philanthropy move as a whole, and where it really is moving in a lot of cases, I think at a slower pace than most of us would like to see, but those changes are happening, and funders are focusing more on diversity, equity, inclusion, those issues that maybe you can tell an anecdotal story about or pull out some qualitative data, not necessarily quantitative, and that's okay with funders, and there is good movement happening. So I did want to just acknowledge that, yes, I've been talking a lot about traditional funders, but there is a lot of great action happening on the other side of the spectrum.
Thank you.
I agree, Sarah. We just received an opportunity that I was like beating myself up over all last summer. I was like, well, we're not going to get it. And I said we weren't going to get it because I looked at who received the opportunity the prior year. And then I just thought, like, this just seems really extensive. And, I just don't think our organization is a contender. But I applied for it anyway, and did I guess you could say it was like an interview. And like the board was like multiple people from various foundations, so I was pretty intimidated. And I thought about like, wow, like it came down to like three organizations. And like one of the organizations was a city, the city of X. So I'm like, nah, we're not going to get this. And then I found out that we got the opportunity. And so I think about what you just said, Sarah, that I do think that funders are recognizing that there needs to be a more inclusive environment. And, some funders truly want to help you. This particular funder has, been a supporter of our organization from infancy to now, but I still didn't think we'd get this opportunity. So, don't discount yourself out because the change is happening. The change and the shift is happening, and it's because of our current environment and because of organizations like Collective. People are watching Collective 365. I know that for a fact.
Thank you for sharing that. Second to last question. So we have two more questions. What does reporting look like? So we've kind of like thrown out that word, but okay, say best case scenario, you get the award letter, congratulations. Are y'all able to speak to like what that looks like? And I want you to speak about it like as if like I know zero. So like from the time you get the check in the mail or it's deposited into your account, however it works, to kind of like the end where you report, if y'all could share that so that folks who are new can understand.
Yeah, so in most cases, you'll get either a grant letter letting you know that you've been awarded a grant and that your check is coming in X weeks or being deposited into your account in X weeks or whatever, or you'll get a check in the mail. Most institutional funders will send some sort of formal letter that outlines any reporting requirements, outlines any specific acknowledgement if they would like to be either anonymous or listed in a certain way in any of your annual report documents or other reporting documents. So they'll typically, most of my grants come with like a 2 or 3 page letter. I always make sure to read it. Sometimes it's hidden in there. They'll say, there'll be like one small little line that says a report is due 1 year from the date of this letter. And if you're just kind of celebrating your check, you might overlook that and forget to put in your calendar to write a report a year later. So always just read that letter and capture any information from the letter that you need to follow up on. And then your next step is really just to write your thank you note. If there was another trustee or program officer who kind of helped you access this new relationship, write them a thank you letter too. So I typically will send one, of course, to the foundation. But then if there was somebody else I was working with, send them a thank you note as well. I also always let my executive director and in most cases board of directors, and that's usually through I don't tell them all what every time an opportunity comes in, but on my monthly dashboards that I create, I'll have a list of all the latest grant opportunities so they can see it right there. And that's so that if they have relationships, they can add their thank yous as well. It's usually much more impactful coming from either an executive director or a board member than the development staff, because they know we're doing our job, but it can mean a little bit more if it comes from somebody else. So I let other folks know. And then I just really approach the relationship from that point. I think about the individuals there. It can be, again, kind of a trap to fall into of like, oh, well, my individuals are here, my foundations are over there. I don't have to do anything with foundations. But you do want to treat them as if you would treat an individual donor and still send updates, send thank yous. If they want photos for their website, keep them informed, keep them updated. If there's a contact, put them on your mailing list so they get your newsletters or whatever other mail you're sending. So treat the relationship as you would treat another individual. But the most important thing is capturing any reporting information that may be snuck into the grant letter.
Yeah, so the reporting that we've had to do looks pretty similar to what Sarah is saying. You'll get a letter where you have to sign it and return it to the foundation, and it will tell you about the reporting. Most of our grants have had like mid-year reporting and end of the year reporting. So that reporting may ask questions about basically your qualitative and quantitative data. So how many people have you served? How many hours? It may be, I know a question that I've seen on reports is like, how have you leveraged, how have you been able to like leverage the funding? Some grants require a little more extensive reporting. Like the one grant we had, like we submitted like a really extensive work plan, an evaluation plan that we have to kind of keep up with, and so what I do, or what I'm doing for this, is every month I kind of look over what are some of the tasks that have to be done. And, I look kind of like at the evaluation plan. What are the processes that we need to do, whether it's, tracking attendance, or whether it's a certain survey, or whether it's some sort of interview, or tracking how many girl power boxes that we gave out. But I say also make sure you have help and strengthen some of those processes that help with reporting. Because, and I think Sarah alluded to this earlier, it can be very easy to have this vision, or this is what the program will look like, but get bogged down in reporting. So the more you can streamline those processes, I think the easier it will make things. But I mean, honestly, the grants that we've had, it's just like a mid-year report and an end of the year report is due. And I would assume that every entity is different in the questions that they ask, but I would definitely say make sure that when you're executing programs, so that when it's time to report, you're not scrambling. Because I'll be honest, in the beginning, I've been in that space. I don't think there's an executive director that can say they haven't been in that space. But if your program coordinator has a system where they're tracking attendance and they're tracking hours, or they're periodically, or if the girls are doing an activity and they did a survey and they upload the results to the survey to this folder, just strengthening those processes so that when that time comes, because it sneaks up on you, you already have those things available, and then you can really speak to the program and the stories. I think that makes that reporting process a little more less stressful.
Bianca, thank you for sharing that, because it triggered something that Sarah had shared with me offline before today, which is making sure that you plan your program before the funding. And so sometimes people see things and they're like, oh, like they're asking for, they're looking to give money to an organization that's supporting COVID relief in X sector. And like you may be in that sector. And so you're like, oh, well, like we could be doing that too. Like we should be providing PPEs in this. And so what then happens, to Bianca's point, is when it's time to evaluate, you're kind of like building the plane as you fly it, versus like saying like, hey, we already are doing this program and we're doing it because we're using individual dollars. It may not be able to serve 50,000 people. It's only serving 1,000 right now, but you kind of know the ins and outs. You already have the system. So then when you do go to a funder and say, hey, we're currently serving 1,000, we want to expand to 2,000, you already have a formula, versus doing it the other way around of like making programs just to get some funding. And I personally, as somebody that used to work in nonprofits, have been there where we're trying to shift our priorities, because that's what funders are now interested in this season. So now we're like, oh, okay, now we're gonna focus on kids that ride bikes versus kids that walk to school, and so thank you for bringing that point up. And it reminded me to share Sarah's point about that.
Yeah, a specific example I'm thinking about, just to kind of hit home on that point, is one of our larger foundation partners. We've received in the past a $75,000 grant, that's big grant for us. So they had pivoted this year to environmental justice away from education. And my first reaction was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing that's environmental justice focused? Like, okay, we have a community garden. Can our kids like take an environmental justice class? And then can we get back in the pool this way? And it was the reality check of, that's not our competency. It's a very important issue, but it's not our competency. Our core competencies are in other spaces, and that's inauthentic to us were we to try to represent ourselves as an organization that focuses on environmental justice, and we're not going to be good stewards of that funding. So it's much harder to have to go find a new $75,000, but you got to stay true to who you are and what your mission is, and be conscious of being good stewards of that funding and being able to report on it accurately. So it was a hard reality check we learned this year.
Yeah, that's like a great example, because circling back to like the point about communities are small. So whether you're in DC, Maryland, or Virginia, people talk. So if I'm giving you $75K for environmental justice and you kind of miss the mark, I'm going to talk to so-and-so who's on the board of such and such foundation. And you don't want to have that reputation of like, oh yeah, we gave them that money and nothing really came of it. So yeah, just things to just keep in mind. So thank you both. Our last question is, what does sustainability look like if you can't secure funding? And we've talked about that, which was like making sure you have a strong individual donor base and cultivating relationships, and just simply saying thank you without an ask. But are there any other tips, tricks that you would want to tell somebody who's like, I'm not bringing in these grants, big or small?
So this is for those who may not be bringing in grants, right? Well, I think that you want to make sure that, you have a development plan, some sort of strategic plan and a development plan. And you want to think about like, where are my buckets of money going to come from? So we talked about individuals, we talked about grants. What about sponsorships like businesses and corporations, fundraisers? Does your organization have like a fundraiser that you can do? And are there smaller opportunities for fundraisers that may not, take a lot of manpower? Um, Additionally, is there some stream of earned revenue that your organization can have? So nonprofits still need to bring in income, just like you would go anywhere else and give money for a service. Is there an opportunity for you to sell something or to charge a nominal fee for a specific service and that bring in revenue for the organization? What does partnership look like? So is there something that you're doing that could mend well with another organization? Are there organizations that provide services that would benefit your nonprofit, but they do it for free because they have staff that's already paid to do that? And I know that sounds kind of like, I don't know, like baseline, but like when I think about the program that we do, if our girls are scheduled to spend a month on fitness, is there an opportunity for me to go to a fitness organization that does fitness and they come and provide those services? That is sustainability. I know that the fitness warriors are going to do these sessions with our girls because that's their mission and that's what they're doing. So that part is taken care of. I know that we can partner with this organization because they have funding to serve X amount of kids by providing cucumbers. I don't know. And we talk about healthy eating with our girls. So there's that opportunity where they can serve our youth and we can still provide the services that we're providing. So I think looking at the partnership piece is key, and looking at all of the different sources of funding outside of grants. Definitely your individuals. That's like Sarah said, that's where it is. But also, do we have a fundraiser? Are there other fundraisers we can do? I mean, come on now. We've all been to places where it's like, this is Peter Paul night. And if you eat this salad, it's going to Peter Paul, just making sure that you have a diverse system of funding. And I would definitely say looking at the partnership, strategic plan, have a development plan in place. Those are some things that have been, I would say, helpful for us because there are so many places and entities and organizations doing things. Additionally, making sure that you're well researched on what your organization needs and who can provide that for you, because that's what they're tasked to provide. Sometimes I hear, about people paying for things, and it's like, well, if you do a little more research, this organization is providing this for this amount. Using your resources wisely and knowing when to invest as well. Knowing when, hey, you know what, we really need to get with a consultant on this. We really need to have someone come in to work with us. to build this so that it can be strong. Those are just some things that come to mind.
Yeah, and to piggyback on your point about partnerships, I think partnership with your board is so important to moving to a sustainable place. There is, in most cases, most organizations' cases, there's an expectation that board members will be a partner in some capacity with fundraising. And I have a practice with my board where I meet one-on-one with everybody throughout the first quarter, and we create a development plan for them. And that sounds intimidating, but it doesn't have to be, you're asking X, Y, and Z for money. It can be, my comfort level is helping with thank yous. So they write thank you notes. There's a multitude of ways to plug your board in a way that's comfortable for them, but can also support the work that you're doing. And they're on your board for a reason. They probably have relationships and networks, experience, certain skills, whatever it is that they bring to your board, use that and rely on them. And they, again, in most cases, have an expectation of contributing to your development office in one capacity or another. So I think that's an important way to kind of move as an organization to a sustainable place. If there's that expectation and they're there to help and do the work, again, whether it's making asks or bringing people by for a tour or writing a thank you note, that's going to help just strengthen your organization overall.
And ask them where they work, because their jobs may have giving programs. A lot of them work in corporate. I don't come from a corporate background. My job isn't giving any funding. They're asking for funding. But, some of our board members, they work at like CarMax and places that will provide funding for board service and things like that, just to piggyback on what Sarah was saying.
These were all great tips. So thank you. We have about 8 minutes left, and I know we have 2 people on the call, so I wanted to open it up if you all wanted to unmute yourself and or utilize the chat to ask Sarah or Bianca any questions.
Good afternoon. Thank you. It was very informational. Thank you, 365 Collective, for organizing this, and thank you to the speakers. I'm Karen Brown Davis, and I'm with the Justin J. Davis Heart Foundation, and we are a very small local nonprofit. And it was interesting. You brought out a lot of good tips, and thank you, Bianca, because I know I speak with you about a lot of these same things, and I really appreciate Sarah's input also. The main question I have is, one of our biggest things is social media. We don't have a big social media presence because I'm not good at social media. And I have a lot of content that I haven't been put up. And I did notice that engagement was one of the things that we kept on mentioning, engagement. How else can we engage with the individual donors? Any other suggestions?
I would say the news, like a newsletter that you can send out on what you've done, what's coming up, anything that you're doing. And it could be, you could start off with like quarterly. A lot of organizations do monthly, or if, I would say just having like an email system. I know for us, I think we use like MailChimp. Some of them probably have it connected to donor management systems, but MailChimp is free. And just having a way to communicate with them, having someone who drafts that each month is a way to engage. Scheduling a phone call, and this is just if you're not into the social media, maybe scheduling phone calls. That's something that comes to mind. But if you're really struggling with social media, because it is time consuming. Try to get a team, try to get try to get a team. And I know that that's hard because like people have like whole jobs to do social media, like where they get a whole salary to do that. So the whole thought of like, how we're gonna pull this off, but we have a marketing committee of 6 volunteers, um, and they help tremendously. They sort of work more around campaigns and leave the day to day to me. So like day to day might not look that great on our page, but like if might go a couple weeks without seeing something, but if it's just like a campaign going on, or like if it's, you know, Giving Tuesday, or if it's back to school time or Women's Month, you know, they're pretty good with, you know, mapping out the content, the hashtags, everything. Um, I also will say that for me, and I'm only speaking to this because I do our social media page. When I sit and map it out, like on a Sunday night, like right on my calendar, that hey, I'm gonna take 1 hour or 2 hours to map out social media content for the next 2 weeks. It's a beautiful thing. But when I just exist and think I'm gonna post one day, I don't get around to it. So I know your question was about what else to do besides social media, but we're just in such a social media like age that I don't want to pass on the opportunity just to share like I get it, and that really sitting and mapping and planning it out helps. Someone on our committee did a content calendar for us, where we could go fill it out, and that has helped me. Sunday evening, Bianca, this week you're going to write out the post. You're going to collect the pictures from whoever it is, which is usually our program, you know, people. You're going to think of the hashtags that apply to girl power or mentoring matters. You know, you're going to do all that, and it's going to take you about 2 hours to map out what your content looks like for a couple weeks, but you'll be able to post something and you just got to copy and paste and post it like that. And when I try to just exist day to day, it doesn't work. Like right now, I've been existing day to day, and our pages hasn't been updated for a couple weeks now. So I just wanted to share that you know, planning helps.
Yeah, those are great points. And all I'll quickly add to that is just as much as you can story tell, that's what's going to capture individuals' attentions. And that's why they gave to you, or that's why they volunteer with you, or however they connect with you. Something sparked that passion. So as much as you can share that back out to them, especially now as we're all kind of remote and at home, we're starting to get back to some semblance of normality. But the compelling stories are why they're involved with you. So we try to do that across our social media, in our newsletter, in our annual report or other printed materials. Like some sort of personal story is what's gonna resonate with most individuals. So that's been a helpful tool for us to kind of keep connected with folks even as we're all remote.
Thank you both, Sarah and Bianca, for your feedback. Karen, I want to add a little bit more about the ways if you don't want to do social media, or social media is not like the preference for you for whatever reason. I want to underscore the phone calls and the emails. Something else you can look into are media. So like reaching out to like Virginia This Morning, like CBS 6, like if I'm just naming like Richmond ones, I'm not sure where you're located, but reaching out to local media and asking like, hey, can I come on and talk about, you know, my thing? And but it has to be, as somebody who uses the media a lot, it has to be centered around an event. So you can't just reach out and be like, hey, I just want to tell people about my mission. It generally needs to be connected to something like for Collective 365, media brought us on because our grant went live February 1. Media has already committed to putting us back on TV when we announce our grant winners. So it's like around something. It's not just like a, hey, we just want to talk about Collective 365. Although I think they should do that, but that's not how TV works. Local newspapers, like we provide like news presses, press releases to local newspapers and TV. So that's another way of like getting your message out there. That's not necessarily social media. And then as far as the social media side, something I wanted to just like massage a little bit more about like planning. If you're a one person operation and a one person operation that's not comfortable with social media, I am that person. Like I just got on social media late 2019. And I'm only on Facebook and Instagram, and I do all of Collective 365's posts. So anytime you see a post, it's me. One thing I have learned in working with like VCU Create-a-thon students is that, and this has already been touched on, you don't necessarily need to post every day. So like you can literally say to yourself, like, look, every first and third Sunday, I am going to go live on Instagram, meaning like I'm going to just talk, like record a video of myself and then post it. And you can articulate that to your followers, like, hey, you can expect to hear from me the first and third Tuesdays. That way it doesn't seem like you've gone dead or like, the organization no longer exists. You can communicate that. So like when Collective 365 was new, you pretty much only got like a financial Fridays from us and like maybe one other post. Now we are like moving and grooving with stuff. Like we have member Mondays, and we have events, but you don't have to force it. And want to underscore what Sarah said. A lot of it is storytelling. So sometimes we get caught up in like it looking pretty. Like we're like, oh, we don't have a graphic designer, or we don't have somebody that can make the fonts dance across the screen. Sometimes it's just a matter of like pulling out your camera, holding it the right way, and saying like, hey, this is Karen. I'm the executive director of so-and-so. And here's the reason why I started the org. The next week could be another like 3-minute interview of like, hey, this is Karen again. I want to talk to you about our programmatic focuses. 2 to 3 minute video. Then the next week, so it doesn't always have to be a shiny graphic or picture. It could just be you talking. So I wanted to just share that. I know you said you're not into social media, but wanted to pare down a little bit more on it. Like, you don't have to start looking like your Walmart or Old Navy where it's like polished and they have a team of designers that are making the content. Did that help, Karen?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. And it's not that I don't feel like I'm competent enough at it. But I feel bad that I can't put the content of the things that we are doing, because we are doing a lot of things in the community. We really pivoted because of COVID, but hopefully we'll be going back toward mission-based things in the near future.
Yeah, and Bianca had a great tip about like asking people, like people that maybe are recipients of your services, like asking them like, hey, would you be interested in like managing our social media for this month? And then maybe next month find somebody else. Like,
oh, that's a good idea.
Leverage people in the community that have the competence and or the passion for social media, and say like, hey, I can't pay you, but this is a way of giving to the organization. And I love what Sarah said about like development plans. There might be, these people, Karen, I'm sure. You're like, Karen, I love what you're doing. And you're like, can you write me a check? And they're like, yeah, girl, but maybe later. Instead, maybe asking them like, hey, do you know somebody that could do our social media? So it's an in-kind donation, so that's like a great way to support us if you don't want to write a check, if maybe they have a nephew or, or a friend that they can connect you with. I don't know if that helps.
That does. And I'm just so grateful to be on this call. Thank you for doing this. I invited several people. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they showed up, but I invited several different smaller nonprofits that I partner with a lot. So I'm really grateful. And I need, is it possible I can talk to you one-on-one maybe later on, Fatima?
Yeah, certainly. This recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. So anybody that registered will get an email to let them know that it's available, so you can rewatch the gems of Sarah and Bianca. So if you didn't get a chance to write down everything, you can replay it. And we are over time, and I'm really sorry about that. I try to be good about ending. So I want to say thank you, Sarah and Bianca, for sharing your time, your passion, your expertise. Thank you, Karen, for attending. And if you have any questions about Collective 365, please visit us at collective365.org. You can also shoot us an email at collective365info@gmail.com. An actual person will respond to you, and we like to engage with folks. So thank you all, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thanks so much. Take care.